Dependence on God's guidance is a foundation of entering a new year with wisdom rather than anxiety. It is the acknowledgement that while we may have experienced intelligence and ambition, none of these can replace divine direction. Too often, people step into a new season armed with resolutions, strategies, and carefully constructed plans, yet forget to invite God into the process. This kind of independence may look like confidence, but it often leads to exhaustion and confusion. True strength is not found in self-reliance, it is found in surrender. When we admit that we do not see the full picture, we make room for God to lead us beyond our limitations. Relying on God's guidance requires humility. It means recognizing that our understanding is shaped by emotions, past experiences, and limited vision. We tend to choose what feels comfortable or familiar, even when it is not what is best for us. God's guidance, however, operates from a higher perspective, one that sees the end from the beginning. Depending on Him means trusting that His direction may challenge our preferences, interrupt our timelines, and stretch our faith. Yet it is in that stretching that growth occurs, and in that obedience that peace is found. Dependence also demands intentional listening. Guidance cannot be received if we are constantly speaking, rushing, or distracting ourselves with noise. Depending on God means creating space for prayer, reflection, and stillness. It is in those quiet moments that clarity often comes, not always as a loud command, but as a steady conviction in the heart. Sometimes God guides by opening doors, and other times by closing them. Both require trust. When a door closes, dependence keeps us from forcing what God has clearly shut. Another aspect of dependence is daily submission. God's guidance is not limited to major life decisions. It extends to everyday choices. How we speak, how we respond, how we treat others, and how we steward what has been entrusted to us. Depending on God daily shifts our mindset from asking, "What do I want?" to asking, "What honors God?" This posture aligns our actions with purpose and keeps us from drifting into self-centered living. Dependence on God also reshapes how we handle uncertainty. Instead of panicking when answers are delayed or outcomes are unclear, we learn to rest in God's faithfulness. Trusting His guidance allows us to move forward without having all the details. It teaches us that clarity often comes after obedience, not before it. When we depend on God, we stop demanding explanations and start embracing direction. Ultimately, dependence on God's guidance is an act of faith that declares we believe God is both willing and able to lead us. It is the decision to place our future in His hands, confident that His wisdom surpasses our own. As we enter a new year, choosing dependence over control sets the tone for a life led by purpose, peace, and divine alignment. The beginning of a new year represents more than the turning of a page on a calendar. It marks a moment of transition where reflection and expectation meet. It is a pause between what has been and what is yet to come. In this space, people naturally look back at victories and losses, joys and disappointments, prayers answered and prayers still waiting. This reflection is not meant to trap us in regret or nostalgia, but to prepare our hearts for what lies ahead. A new year invites us to acknowledge where we have been while remaining open to where God is leading us next. Transition often carries both excitement and uncertainty. Stepping into something new requires leaving something familiar behind, and that can be uncomfortable. The past year may have contained seasons of struggle, moments of growth, or chapters that ended unexpectedly. Yet transition reminds us that endings are not failures. They are often the necessary closing of one season so another can begin. What we release in one season creates space for what God wants to establish in the next. Embracing this truth allows us to enter the new year with hope instead of fear. A new beginning also calls for renewed clarity. Many people desire change without transformation, expecting different results while holding on to the same habits, mindsets, and priorities. The start of a new year challenges us to realign our focus and reassess what truly matters. It invites us to ask deeper questions about purpose, direction, and values. Clarity comes when we are willing to let go of distractions that cloud our vision and commit ourselves to what brings meaning and spiritual alignment. Transition also requires patience. While the new year brings fresh possibilities, it does not erase the process required to grow into them. Seeds planted in faith still need time to develop. New beginnings are often gradual, unfolding step by step rather than appearing fully formed. Learning to honor the process keeps us from becoming discouraged when immediate results are not visible. Growth in a new season is not measured by speed, but by consistency and faithfulness. The idea of new beginnings also carries the promise of renewal. Regardless of past failures or unmet expectations, the new year offers an opportunity to start again with wisdom gained from experience. Renewal does not mean forgetting the past. It means allowing it to shape us without defining us. What once caused pain can now produce insight, and what once delayed progress can now strengthen resolve. The new year becomes a chance to move forward with greater maturity and deeper trust. Ultimately, transition and new beginnings remind us that time itself is a gift. Each new year is an opportunity to live with greater intention, faith, and purpose. It calls us to step forward, not burdened by what was, but inspired by what can be, trusting that every season, past, present, and future, plays a role in the unfolding of God's plan. Choosing trust over control is one of the most challenging yet transformative decisions a person can make, especially at the beginning of a new year. Control gives the illusion of safety. It convinces us that if we plan enough, manage every detail, and anticipate every outcome, we can protect ourselves from disappointment and failure. Yet control often becomes a heavy burden, producing anxiety rather than peace. Trust, on the other hand, requires releasing the need to have all the answers and believing that God's direction is sufficient even when the path is unclear. The struggle between trust and control usually surfaces when circumstances do not align with expectations. When progress feels slow, doors remain closed, or outcomes differ from what was envisioned, the instinct to take matters into our own hands grows stronger. Control promises immediate relief, but it often leads to decisions driven by fear rather than faith. Trust invites patience, reminding us that timing is just as important as direction. God's guidance is not only about where we are going, but also about when we are meant to arrive. Trust over control also reshapes how we view uncertainty. Instead of seeing the unknown as a threat, trust allows us to see it as an opportunity for growth. Uncertainty stretches faith, inviting deeper reliance on God rather than on personal understanding. When we release control, we accept that not every step will be visible in advance. We learn to walk by faith, taking each step as it comes, confident that God's wisdom exceeds our limited perspective. This choice also affects obedience. Control often negotiates with obedience, asking for explanations before action. Trust, however, moves forward even when explanations are absent. Obedience rooted in trust does not require full clarity. It requires confidence in the character of God. When we trust God, we obey not because the path makes sense, but because we believe God is faithful. This kind of obedience opens the door to peace that is not dependent on circumstances. Releasing control does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means surrendering outcomes while remaining faithful in action. Trust allows us to plan without becoming rigid, to prepare without becoming obsessed, and to work diligently without becoming overwhelmed. It keeps our hearts flexible and open to redirection. When God interrupts our plans, trust enables us to adapt rather than resist. Recognizing that divine interruptions often lead to greater purpose. Choosing trust over control also brings emotional freedom. Control breeds fear, frustration, and exhaustion because it places the weight of the future entirely on human effort. Trust lifts that weight, allowing us to rest in God's ability to lead, provide, and protect. It replaces anxiety with peace and pressure with confidence. Over time, this choice transforms how we respond to challenges, teaching us to remain grounded even when circumstances shift unexpectedly. Ultimately, trust over control is a daily decision, not a one-time declaration. It is the continual act of placing our plans, timelines, and expectations in God's hands. Each day presents new opportunities to surrender and believe again. As we embrace trust, we discover that letting go of control does not weaken us. It strengthens our faith and aligns our lives with God's perfect will. God's direction in decisions and relationships is essential for living a life aligned with purpose and peace. Every decision, whether large or small, shapes the course of our lives, and every relationship influences who we become. Without divine guidance, it is easy to be drawn toward what appears beneficial on the surface, but ultimately leads away from growth and fulfillment. God's guidance brings discernment, helping us to recognize not only what is good, but what is right for our season and calling. Decisions are often influenced by emotions, pressure, or the desire for immediate results. When faced with choices, people may prioritize convenience over wisdom or familiarity over purpose. Seeking God's direction shifts the focus from temporary satisfaction to long-term impact. It encourages patience, prayer, and reflection before action. Rather than reacting impulsively, divine guidance helps us respond thoughtfully, allowing peace to serve as a confirmation rather than urgency as a motivator. Relationships require even greater discernment because of their deep emotional and spiritual influence. The people we connect with can either strengthen our faith or slowly erode it. God's direction helps us identify relationships that nurture growth, accountability, and encouragement. It also brings the courage to recognize when certain connections though meaningful in the past, are no longer healthy or aligned with our purpose. Letting go of such relationships can be painful, but divine guidance reassures us that release is sometimes necessary for renewal. God's guidance also protects us from distraction. Not every opportunity is an assignment, and not every open door leads to fulfillment. Distractions often come disguised as good options that consume time and energy without producing lasting fruit. Seeking God's direction helps us prioritize wisely, focusing on what aligns with our calling rather than scattering our efforts across too many pursuits. This clarity brings focus and prevents burnout. Another aspect of divine direction in decisions and relationships is the ability to set boundaries. Boundaries are not signs of rejection, they are expressions of wisdom and self-respect. God's guidance teaches us when to say yes and when to say no, when to engage and when to step back. Healthy boundaries preserve emotional, spiritual, and mental well-being, allowing us to show love without losing ourselves in the process. Divine guidance also brings confirmation through peace. When a decision or relationship is aligned with God's will, it may still require courage, but it is often accompanied by a sense of inner assurance. This peace does not eliminate challenges, but it provides stability in the midst of them. Conversely, persistent unease can be a signal to pause and seek further clarity. Learning to recognize these inner signals deepens trust in God's leading, ultimately allowing God to guide decisions and relationships is an act of surrender that places trust in His wisdom rather than personal judgment. It acknowledges that God desires our well-being and understands the full impact of every choice we make. By inviting His direction into every area of life, we position ourselves to walk with greater clarity, protection, and purpose. Growth often comes through seasons that feel uncomfortable, uncertain, and even discouraging. Waiting and pruning are two processes that challenge patience and test faith, yet they are essential for meaningful and lasting growth. Waiting is rarely passive. It is an active season of trust where character is refined and endurance is built. In these moments, it may feel as though progress has stalled, but waiting often serves a deeper purpose, preparing us for responsibilities we are not yet ready to carry. Waiting exposes the condition of the heart. It reveals whether our faith is rooted in outcomes or in trust. When answers are delayed and timelines stretch beyond expectation, frustration can easily take over. However, waiting invites reflection, self-examination, and deeper dependence on God. It teaches us to rely on God's timing rather than our own urgency. What feels like a delay is often protection, preventing premature movement that could hinder future growth. Pruning is an equally challenging process because it involves removal. It is the cutting away of habits, mindsets, relationships, or opportunities that no longer serve a healthy purpose. While pruning may feel like loss, its intent is restoration and fruitfulness. God removes what drains strength so that energy can be redirected toward what produces lasting results. This process can be painful because it often involves letting go of things that once felt necessary or meaningful. Through pruning, priorities are clarified. What remains after pruning is often more focused, more aligned, and more productive. It strips away excess and distraction, creating space for deeper growth. Although pruning may temporarily reduce visible progress, it strengthens the foundation. Growth that comes after pruning is usually healthier and more sustainable because it is built on purpose rather than excess. Waiting and pruning also cultivate humility. They remind us that growth is not solely dependent on effort or ambition. There are seasons when the most productive thing we can do is trust, reflect, and remain faithful in small actions. These seasons reduce pride and foster gratitude, helping us recognize that growth is ultimately a gift rather than an achievement. Another important aspect of waiting and pruning is the development of resilience. Enduring seasons of uncertainty builds emotional and spiritual strength. It teaches perseverance and deepens faith. When growth finally becomes visible, it is often accompanied by a greater appreciation for the process that led there. The lessons learned during waiting become tools for navigating future challenges with wisdom and confidence. Waiting and pruning also prepare individuals for greater responsibility. Expansion without preparation can lead to instability, but growth that follows refinement is balanced and grounded. These processes ensure that when opportunities arise, they can be handled with maturity and integrity. The discomfort of pruning gives way to clarity, and the patience developed through waiting produces confidence rooted in trust rather than haste. Ultimately, waiting and pruning are not signs of stagnation or rejection. They are evidence of intentional development. They reveal a commitment to long-term growth rather than short-term success. Though these seasons may feel slow and difficult, they play a crucial role in shaping character, strengthening faith, and producing growth that endures.